using fingers. Oh. Oh, so they can like. Yeah, no, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that. And also, again, I know that this is uncomfortable, but I do think it's important to be, I think you guys are, old enough to handle this material. Like, when I go to high school, I don't talk about this stuff, right? I mean, I talk about sexual assault, but I don't get into, like, this detail. But I do, these things are very common. We hear about sexual assaults. At Sexual Trauma Services, we approximately get 1 hospital call a day. What that means is there may be some days where we don't get a hospital call, and then there are some weekends where we get 13 in a weekend. We had, a couple weekends ago, we had 9 in a weekend. So we get these calls all the time. Our hotline rings over 500 times a year. So again, if you 365 days in a year, how many times are people calling our hotline? And sometimes it's just asking for information, but most of those people that call our hotline never told law enforcement. They never told anybody. They're just calling because they don't have anybody else to talk to. So these kinds of things, although uncomfortable, I do think are important to talk about because they are happening a lot more than we might realize. So, in the last few minutes, I'm going to skip through some slides. I always have like a million more slides than I'll ever use. I'm going to skip through the law stuff, and I want to talk real briefly about the effects. First of all, there is no one normal reaction to sexual assault or any kind of trauma. People who experience sexual assault and sexual violence can live normal, healthy, happy lives. They can become whole again. They can have relationships, they can get married if they want to, they can have children, they can live successful careers, that kind of thing. However, it does take work, and it is the kind of trauma that affects someone for the rest of their life. So there are all different kinds of effects, but some of the effects are, the physical effects you can see and the emotional effects. Low self-esteem, feelings of guilt, very common. We put those feelings of guilt on survivors as well. They already feel guilty. They feel like if I hadn't gone to that party, maybe I shouldn't have talked to that person. Maybe I shouldn't have been wearing that outfit. They already feel that. And then they might go to their friend or they go to their family or they tell someone and they say, oh, I wish you hadn't done that. Or why did you do that? And those misplaced anger makes that victim or the survivor feel even worse. The low trust, trust issues, of course, because usually this happens in a trusting relationship. So the person that they trusted took advantage of that trust. How could they possibly then trust another person? And that trust then, of course, adds to a feeling of isolation because they feel like, who can I go to? Who can I trust? Where can I go and be safe? They often feel powerless because their power was taken away. Again, I said this was about power and control. So someone took their power, their control over their own body was taken. And so then they often feel powerless. And a lot of times what happens, again, not all the time, but in many situations, survivors of sexual assault, because they feel powerless, they kind of give up all hope. And they're like, well, I'm useless now. And so then they end up having many sex partners. Because they just feel like, again, this is not across the board for everyone, but this has happened in many situations, that sometimes they feel like, well, there's nothing good anyway. So I might as well just, somehow they feel like they're going to get themselves back that way. And so then what happens is they get multiple victimization. We often get STDs and HIV, unintended pregnancies. And then also there's a lot of numbing of that pain, that emotional pain that goes with it. So we have drug and alcohol problems. And a lot of times this kind of leads to, sort of a ripple effect. We talked about some of these already. Lack of interest. For teenagers, we see a lot of school issues and running away. We see a lot of self-mutilation, like cutting. Difficulty maintaining jobs, especially because this kind of thing sometimes affects people for their life. What happens with it is it goes up and down like this. So someone may have the sexual assault and of course they're in a down period and they may seek help or they may talk to their friend or they may find a way to get their power back and they feel okay for a little while so they go back up again. And then something happens. Maybe it's the anniversary of the assault. Maybe they saw a movie and it was great in the movie. Or maybe they read about it in the newspaper. Whatever it is, it could have nothing to do with sexual assault. Maybe, maybe they're just having a bad class or something. They hate their teacher or something, And so then they go in a down period again. And then they go back up and they go back down. So if this happened, let's say 5 years ago, and they're in a new job, and they're having a down period, they might not want to tell their job why they're having trouble getting to their job. Or they may tell their job and they're like, happened 5 years ago, get over it. There's a lack of understanding how long this takes to sort of get, quote unquote, get over it or become whole again. So lack of job as well. I think I'm going to stop there. Let's see if there's anything else. I have a lot of slides that I'm not going to go over. It's not even going anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there anyway. That's a good sign to just go ahead and stop. Any last questions about anything we've talked about here? Anything there's a whole lot more we could talk about, but I want to respect y'all's time for the evening and that kind of thing. Just if you ever know someone who has experiences a sexual assault, I will say that. Obviously we tell them, we want them, if they can, to get to the hospital so that they can get checked out. In South Carolina, you can actually have, a survivor can have evidence collected and they can decide later if they want to press charges. So they can get that evidence and then decide within a year if they're ready to press charges. South Carolina, you actually can press charges anytime. It can be 15 years later, it can be 20 years later. Even if they haven't had evidence collected, they can still press charges. And that is all about, again, them becoming comfortable and being ready to press charges. If they don't go to the hospital, they still may need to talk to someone. And that's why Sexual Trauma Services is here, because you don't have to have press charges to access our services. You guys on campus have a counselor. That's a great resource for you guys. A lot of times it's just a matter of going to someone that you trust who will say to you, it's not your fault. Or if someone ever tells you, the best thing you can say to them is, it's not your fault. I believe you. And then finding out whatever they need to do to get their power back. If they're not ready to tell anyone, they might not be ready. And we need to respect that and just help them with wherever they are at. That's really important, to letting it be their decision because they already feel powerless. So we want to help put the power back in their hands and say, what can I do to help you? What do you need from me? Why are you telling me? Do you want me to just keep it secret? Like, what do you want? That kind of thing. So I thank you guys for coming out. Like I said, I'm here for questions. If you want to come up, we do have our handouts up here. And I wish you guys a safe spring break, please.